everybody. I want to call this meeting to order, and I take the opportunity to welcome the officials from the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, and members of her staff, and also members of the Port Authority, including the chairman. And also, of course, I want to welcome the media, if they are here. And I don't think we have any members of the public, but I think we have your auditors here, is that right? You have the auditing company here? Okay. No, not the auditing. Huh? You have internal audit. Okay, here. Okay. My name is Boindradat Tiwari. I'm the chair of the committee and member for Kaini Central. And I will ask the other members of my team to introduce themselves so that you'll know the people you are engaging here. I will also give you a chance to introduce yourself. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is to examine the audited financial statements of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, PATT, for the years 2008 to 2011, and the authority's expenditure and internal controls from 2008 to 2018. We as a committee are desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by you, the Port Authority, and your key stakeholders. And the idea is to determine whether we can come up with some possible solutions for some of these challenges. The role of this committee is to help PATT to improve its delivery of services in an efficient and effective and economic manner. This meeting is being held in public and will be broadcast on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Before I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, I will ask representatives of the Ministry of Works and Transport if you would introduce yourselves, and following that, the members of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Would you do that, please?
Pleasant good morning. Let me acknowledge the pleasant welcome from the chairman of the committee and the opportunity to introduce members of the Ministry of Works and Transport. My name is Etlin John, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works and Transport. We have with us today Ms. Lisa Balkaran, Chief Planning Officer, as well as Mr. Rupert Harak, Organizational Performance Management Specialist in the Ministry of Works and Transport.
Okay. And from the Port Authority.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. The Port Authority is grateful for the opportunity to be here and look forward to the discussions, because we are sure that the outcome of these discussions will help us as we go forward with our planning for the years ahead. The team from the port here this morning includes the acting general manager, the executive finance manager, the internal auditor, and also Mr. Berkeley as well from the financial department. And also we have with us the audit subcommittee of the board, the members of the board, Commissioner Jagannath, Commissioner Batiste, and Commissioner Sukla. They're here with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask members of my committee if they would introduce themselves. Please, I'll start here with the Deputy Chairman.
Good morning, all. Tahar Kobika, Vice Chairman.
Morning, Lester Henry, member. Morning, Sharisi Prasad, member.
Good morning, Ayana Webster-Roy, member.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative of the Ministry of Works, in this case, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, if she'd like to make a brief opening statement. And the chairman, likewise, if you'd like to make an opening statement after she has presented, please do so, so that I could have a frame of what you want to say. Yeah.
Okay. Pleasant good morning to the chairman again, as well as members of the committee. The Ministry of Works and Transport is pleased to be present here today and express our gratitude to the committee, to the Public Accounts Committee, for allowing us the opportunity to participate in this morning proceedings. Let me apologize on behalf of the Permanent Secretary, who, due to exigencies of the service, was unable to be with us today. The Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is responsible for the provision of a coordinated and integrated system of harbor facilities and port services. The operations of the port is entrusted in the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, which was established via Chapter 5101 of the Port Authority Act. The ministry, in executing its role and function, provide general oversight of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago in alignment with the Port Authority Act. In light of the foregoing, and in the context of the critical nature of the service provided by the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and its business unit, the ministry acknowledges the importance of audited financial statements, transparency, and accountability with regards to expenditure and efficiency and effectiveness in internal control. The ministry acknowledges that there are a number of challenges which currently face the port in the execution of its mandate. We look forward to interacting with the committee today, as was indicated, in identifying solutions as we go forward to enable the port to provide the level of service that is required by the public of Trinidad and Tobago. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Alexander.
Chairman, members, as I said earlier on, we truly appreciate the opportunity to be here in support of the tasks of the Ministry of Works and Transport. As a new board on the Port Authority, we recognize the value and the importance of having a proper accounting in terms of providing the level of governance as required for the port. And we look forward to this discussion because there are some challenges that are directly related to the funding of the operations. And we look forward to the outcome of these discussions so that we can be guided going forward in achieving our strategic aims and objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will begin with some general questions, and then my colleagues will pursue their own issues that they have identified for consideration this morning. I want to welcome the member for San Fernando East who just joined us, so I'll ask him to just introduce himself.
Good morning, members. I am Randall Mitchell, member.
Okay. The first question I'm going to ask is this. What does it cost to run the port annually, on average? Now, the reason I ask questions like this is because this is a public engagement of the Port Authority, and the citizens of this country are they tend to be very interested in issues that come out of these committee meetings. And therefore, many of the questions I ask are questions that the ordinary citizen would want to know. Yeah.
Good morning,
Yeah.
Chairman, and good morning, committee. I would allow the Executive Manager Finance to give you that type of
Sure.
detail.
The cost of running the port is approximately, I would say, about $500 million.
Okay, you want to add anything to that?
That $500 million is divided up between the business units, which includes PPOS, Pacinco, for the most part, TTIT, which is also included as a business unit.
Okay. And how much do you earn in the port annually? How much income do you generate in the port? On average, it can be a ballpark figure. It need not be a precise number for a particular year.
I would say approximately 285 million.
285. Okay, so just about, does that mean that you get about 45% of the money that you need to operate the port as subsidies, as transfers from the government, from the state?
Well, the subsidies from the government is mainly towards TTIT, which is a government shipping service. The Pacinco and PPOS is minimal for operating expenses. I would say in the last 3 years, there's been zero for operating expenses.
Okay, so you're not subsidized for operations, but you're subsidized for some of the units. And the subsidy is about 200 million, so to speak, about that, right? Can the port be self-sufficient and profitable? And if you do not wish to answer that, if the chair, if you wish to answer that,
The simple answer to the question is yes, it can be.
it can be.
It can
Okay.
be, yeah. It requires a certain particular approach to running the business.
Yes.
But it can be, yes.
Do you have a plan now to make it self-sufficient over time? Let's say 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is.
At the moment, we are looking at a plan which will be delivered to the, or we expect to be delivered to the Infrastructure Committee of Cabinet within 2 weeks, I would think, whenever that date is set. We're ready to put a plan forward that can put the framework together, put the platform together to get us to a place where we can be self-sufficient, yes.
Okay, and when do you, in the plan that you are proposing, what is the time frame within which you can begin to sort of break even?
That probably depends on the model that is decided upon, but we're looking at between 10 to 15 years probably.
Wow. Okay, now, for me that is problematic. I don't know what my other colleagues will say. You know that there are models of very profitable ports in the world now, right? I mean, many of them tend to be Chinese, and Singapore has always been a very profitable port, but there have been ports like in South Korea, in other places, that have been modestly well done. And even in Jamaica, they are making significant progress. Some of the ports in Latin America, which really were very badly run, have made progress. Did you look at some of those models? Are you aware of what is the situation there? In the main, they have to do with the issue of productivity, the issue of logistics, and the issue of technology.
We did look at some of those models, and we believe that some of them, the model can fit our operations.
Okay.
There are some particular component of that that we need to probably look at here that requires the entities to function as commercial entities. That is one of the issues that we have right now, that we're experiencing right now in the port, in that the level of, once a port is public and is dependent on public funding, that's one of the major challenges. So it is very possible that if the entities are set up and there's a lot more, maybe some more involvement of private operations, the success rate is probably would be much higher then, and we can have better expectations or higher expectations of success and profitability there.
What is it in the public model that makes it, what is it in the public model that makes it difficult for the port to become self-sufficient? And the second part of that question is, what is it in the introduction of what you are suggesting as public-private that would help to make it successful?
Okay. The identified challenges in terms of the public ports and publicly run ports. The academic definition or description, of the success of ports starts off to a large extent by saying that the ports fail to a large extent because of interference by the public system, so to speak. And the public system is not as flexible as it ought to be because of it is by nature bureaucratic in the processes that are involved in terms of getting decisions made and implementation of the plans and so on. So there's a built-in delays into those processes. If we can find a way to work around that or to find other models that can take care of that, then that is one issue that can be looked at. The other one is infrastructure is extremely expensive. So the question is, when there's competing elements for the spend of when infrastructure is required in a public port, then that is competing against other expenditure that's required. So the cost of expenditure is also very, very instrumental in slowing the progress and commercialization of ports. So going forward, if there's to be successful, we have to bear in mind that we have to reduce the outside interference, so to speak, in the operations of the facility, allow the facility to be able to make decisions. The structure of the organization has to be a lot more flexible and be able to make decisions relevant to making the ports profitable.
Okay, so tell me if I'm summarizing you properly. You are saying that bureaucracy on the one hand, you didn't say this, but I suspect that you mean political interference on the other, infrastructure requirements and equipment requirements, and the difficulty of competing with other government entities. Those things tend to hamstring the port from operating as a business.
Correct.
And that if you brought in the private sector, what you would get are two things. One is finance, of course, because you get investment. And the second thing that you would get is some measure of flexibility, because you would then have those units that were public, private, or private operating according to a business model. Is that, did I summarize you correctly?
Correct, and I'd just like to add two other things. One is that the question of labor, of course, which is associated and connected to the fact that it's a public port. There'll be some kind of expectations regarding the provision of labor in that regard. That is also a factor that needs to be considered. And further, with the involvement of the private sector, there's vested interest to a large extent based on the type of investment that is utilized in the process that will cause the momentum to be maintained because the interest will be to the benefit of all the parties involved there.
Okay, I'll ask one final question and then I'll pass on to Member Mitchell, who has an interest in following up with some questions. We have had a problem, I would say, over the last few years with balance of trade. Has that affected the amount of work that comes to the port, let's say, over the last 3 years or so?
But to the general manager to give a better description of that.
Good morning again, and thank you. In terms of,
Okay.
so in terms of volumes, in terms of the cargo being handled through the port, yes, there has been.
You have less now.
Yeah, there has been a decline in cargo. But what we have seen, because we also monitor the ports within the country, 2 major ports within the country. So the imports have remained settled, relatively stable. The exports at Port of Spain would have declined over the years. However, they would have been maintained at, say, the other ports. So generally, and we've been able to regain some domestic cargo. Generally, what we have seen is the domestic cargo in and out of the country not changing significantly. Where we have had a major loss in Port of Spain is with the transshipment cargo and the country as a whole. And that would have been due to external factors as well as some internal factors. So the balance is reasonably the same domestically.
I'll come back to that, but I made an error just now. It is Member Ayanna Webster Roy who wanted to pursue some questions, so we'll go over to her.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, in your opening discourse, you would have mentioned that there's a strategic plan being developed that will be presented to the Fiscal Infrastructure Committee. And in that plan, you project now within 10 to 15 years from the start for implementation, the port would be profitable. That is correct?
That is part of it, yes.
Okay. What I wanted to understand, for the public to understand, what is your current business model? What is the proposed business model? And what are some of the changes that we can expect that will lead you along this road to profitability in terms of the operation, management, and financing?
In terms of the current model, the organization is experiencing some challenges because of the way it has been operating over the years. The public port model is really what I think is in general, what is the biggest hindrance to the profitability of the port. We have equipment, for example, as part of the preparation for this exercise to deliver this plan. Just in one area, in terms of the equipment that we use on the port right now, most, if not all, of the equipment that is utilized on the port is beyond the expected shelf life of that equipment. Most of it, by about 50%. So the thing is, over time, we have not really put in the kind of sustaining processes to keep the business going. We have suffered as well by we have actually lost some business because of the opening of the Panama Canal. There are people now who are moving bigger ships that we are unable to accommodate. We have not maintained sufficiently the dredging capability in the harbor. So there are some fundamental issues that have put us in a place right now where it requires a significant investment to be able to make a big leap in terms of making a big difference. So the thing is, right now, our biggest need is investment. We need to dredge the harbor. We need additional equipment. We need bigger cranes to be able to take care of the vessels that are coming in. So to be able to do that in the current climate of funding that we're experiencing right now in the country, we have to find some way of getting those things done, because there's no way we can go forward if we don't have the bigger cranes and if we can't accommodate the larger vessels. So this is money that is critical, very critical. And as an example, it requires something like $60 million to dredge the harbor, channel and the harbor. So the model going forward will have to be, how do we increase in the investment to be able to get the processes and equipment and infrastructure in place to be able to deliver. So we have to consider inviting more participation by the private sector going forward to be able to do that. There are quite a number of models out there where there are people, investors who are quite prepared to build ports for you. Of course, the arrangements then will be based on the economics, and I will gladly give way to be advised where that is concerned. But in terms of the model going forward, it will have to be a private increase in private sector involvement in the operations of the port.
The model that you will proceed with, how do you see that impacting on the inter-island aspect of the port?
The inter-island aspect, to some extent, will probably benefit from it. Will probably benefit from that. And this is not taking first of all, in terms of the inter-island, let's understand that the ferry system, I want to exclude that from this specific discussion, because the ferry system, to my mind, is a given. That must continue, has to continue. But in terms of the commercialization of the port, there can certainly be opportunities by opening and getting more activity in the port of Scarborough to be able to exploit the Eastern Caribbean and other areas, to be able to get that kind of traffic going on. And it also, from the consumer's point of view, from the public point of view, we ought to be in a position to fit into some of the cargo delivery models right now, which basically is door-to-door, to be able to deliver cargo for people in Tobago in particular, directly to Tobago, instead of having this stop in Port of Spain before getting to Tobago. So there can be some positive impacts on that as well.
Senator Tahaka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning again. Basically, a few things. Chairman, you just mentioned door-to-door. However, when one looks at the strategic plan and the strategic business units that I mentioned there, I'm not sure where it falls under. I know it wouldn't be TTIT. It wouldn't be the Port of Spain Infrastructure Company. I'm not sure if it would be the Port Governing Unit, or is that a separate unit that you're envisioning that has not been featured in the strategic plan that is in front of us?
The strategic plan that you have, but let me put it another way. What we are looking at going forward, it's as a single entity, not without the SBUs, but the strategy that we're looking at is not saying specifically at this point that this will be done, this will be done, this will be done by these special business units. But it's a holistic approach that we are taking as far as the strategic units are concerned. Of course, anything to do with the commercialization of the cargo operations, the feature division, the feature group handling that will be the PPOS business unit, because that's what they are, the Port of Spain. But the actual SBUs that we have at the moment, there still needs to be, is a work in progress, is still to be properly defined. It's not a, it has never been formalized. It has never been completed. That transformation process was not formalized and completed.
I'm not to cut you because I really wanted to be a flowing discussion, right? The issue I have, and this actually illustrates my point, because if one turns to page 25 of the strategic plan, under the title Strategic Goals and Objectives 2016-2017, you know, and also you look at page 15, which shows the financials, and when you go to the actual financial statements, you see broad aggregates, even in the notes to the financial statements. So there's a question I have, a specific question for the acting general manager. I can see you. How do you envision, how do you have sight of each business unit in an operational basis? Because if it's not reflected in the financials, how do you manage it? How do you know that really and truly you have a lot of duds and no star performers?
Thank you for the question. It is, in fact, monitored. So the 3 strategic business units are different operations. So they're core businesses. The Port of Spain is cargo handling. So revenue generated by that business is from moving boxes on and off the vessel within the terminal, in and out. So we report on a monthly basis, and we monitor and look at the financials of that business unit in terms of its revenue, its expenditure, and we also have the overheads. Now, the ferry service, those financials are also reported separately in terms of the business unit, and it's matched again, revenue, expenditure, et cetera. The Port of Spain Infrastructure Company, it's the same thing. So even though, because the 3 strategic business units are not fully functional, operational companies, we cannot report the financials separately, right? However, we do have them reported internally, separately, as well as reporting the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago financials as a whole, as an entire entity. So going back to what the finance person would have said, what that shows you, for instance, with the Port of Spain, if you look at direct expenditure versus revenue, you would be operating a profit when you look at the financials. Now, we have shared services and we have overheads, and the overheads, which would have come out of a PwC report.
I want to cut you because I really want it to be a flowing discussion. So I want to stick to that point that you made, that you have sight of it. And if you turn to page 61 of the strategic plan, under funding requirements, you're seeing that 1.6 billion is required. A total of 1.47, it reflects differently on the table 12 below that. And on page 64, there's mention of if there is difficulty, I'm assuming, of getting government subvention to get this done, engaging a private partner, as Jamaica has done with CMA CGM. Now, the question is, going to a private partner side, you're coming to the government. How can a policymaker in the government decide if you're going to make best use of $1.6 billion? Mind you, that's a significant chunk of our government expenditure. So how can we expect that the results will be what we expect? And I think if it is, you have sight of the 4 business units under you, it may be of value to the government to present that information, even if it may not form part of the audited financial statements because of financial best practice. It may be of value to present an annual report as an attachment to that gives a policymaker some understanding. So, for example, I can't even appreciate which business unit is successful from which one is a complete failure So then I can now have a rich conversation with your chairman at the policy level. So that's, to me, that's something I think we could benefit from. The other point I wanted to make, so that's the first point. The second point I wanted to make is, in the chairman's opening, he responded to a question from the chairman of our committee regarding ICT. And if you turn to page 50 of the strategic plan, there's a competitor analysis under the environmental scan where you match with ports in Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, Santo Domingo, and as well the port of Point Lisas. And under ICT, I might assume that the number 5 there means that you are ranked 5, as in 5 out of 6, so, which is not good, or am I interpreting the table incorrectly? If you go down the table on page 50 of the strategic plan, I assume I'm watching the strategic plan, right? I'm just waiting until you all give me some sign that I'm on the same page with you.
Yes, page 50.
Right. So on page 50, you go down, there's a heading ICT under the key success factors under KSF. And you're seeing 5 under Port of Port-of-Spain. The rank of 5.
5 is good. 5
out of 6.
Yeah. Yes, the Port of Port-of-Spain.
Let me just show you what I understood and just make sure we are speaking the same language here. I'm seeing 6 ports, and I'm seeing we have a rank of 5. So I assume that 5 out of 6 was poor compared to 1 out of 6.
No, we have ICT. We have ICT.
Well, I'm asking them. That is what I'm asking them now. I would have assumed this. Because I would have assumed the first place is number 1, and then the last place is number 6.
I think that's correct.
Right. So given that, and when you turn to I think it's on page 25, you look at the, it's page 15. Okay, I've missed the page, but when you looked at the plans for transforming the business model, I didn't see ICT featuring significantly in terms of, at least in terms of the expenditure. The expenditure spoke a lot about matching the Panamax type vessels, which is very consistent with what you are saying, Mr. Chairman, very consistent, and that deserves merit in terms of looking at it. But if we have a poor rank in terms of ICT, and it's even worse than Point Lisas, I mean, we want to look at how does that feature into the request for funding, you know, and if that does feature, if that could be explained. So that's basically my contribution thus far. Can get any response on the ICT ranking and what that means.
I'd like to get back to you all and get to further clarify this, because now this would be a competitor analysis based on ports in the region, right? And obviously, you know, ports like Caucedo, Cartagena, Manzanillo, which are top ports in the region, their ICT capabilities would be, you know, second to none. But I would like to get back to ensure that there's not an error here, because I see Puerto Cabello, which is 6, and that is also a relatively top port. The Port of Port-of-Spain, we have a terminal operating system. We've been functioning with a terminal operating system since 2003, meaning our operations at the Port of Port-of-Spain, discharge, load of cargo, delivery of cargo is automated. We upgraded to Navis Sparks N4, which is a world-class system in 2011, 2012.
Which is on page 38 of the strategic plan.
So in terms of the cargo handling aspect, we are very much ICT. In terms of we even do appointments. A haulier goes online to book an appointment to come into the port to take up delivery, and there's no paper transactions taking place per se at the gate. We print out a ticket, so it is very automated. However, within the administrative side, we have other systems. So if we're looking at ICT as an organization wide, there are areas for improvement. So I'd like to confirm this ranking.
And if you could reconcile what your plans are for ICT and the business item that the chairman mentioned regarding delivery to door for small packages, with respect to page 25, where under the strategic goals and objectives, no mention is made of the SBUs, except to say one line, which is under priority projects, facilitating project financing on behalf of SBUs. And business operations, implementing a mechanism for monitoring SBU performance and plan achievement. So those things seem to me to be esoteric, and I'm sure from a chairman's perspective in terms of results and from a CEO's perspective in terms of operationalization, this may not really give you the targets that you may really want, and you may want to look at fleshing out that, and then we can now monitor. Because if you're coming for $1.5 billion, and if you could explain if you're actually coming for this 1.5 billion, if you have made any request for it, that is the figure reference on page 64. If you'll have made any requests for funding for this 1.5 billion dollars, which I guess would include, among other things, the dredging of the channel, as the chairman cited, is very necessary. So if you can give some indication as to what exactly has been done regarding this funding request, if you have requested or if you're about to?
From an operational setting at the moment, if I may just try to put some clarity around this. First of all, as far as the points regarding the criteria for the competitor analysis there, as written, it is clear that compared to the other ports around, we are not where we need to be with the ICT issues, and those will have to be, that was factored into the forward planning at the moment. For example, in terms of one major situation is that we still have a manual processing of the movement of visitors and so on the port. But an operation that size, really, it ought not to be to make it more efficient. So in that competitor analysis, we have to accept, I think, based on what is provided here, that we are not as where we need to be where ICT is concerned when you think in terms of the others. It is also instructive that the other ports that are running one in terms of ICT, most of those ports are where there has been significant investment by private investors who have actually come in and brought their systems in, and those ports are actually built and operated by them. So that can account for the disparity in terms of where we are with ICT and so on. Also, there's some items for operations here that are actually handled through PSIP funding. So, for example, the dredging issue or the dredging operation, funding was required. We actually had a tender that we actually has been evaluated, and we are about to make a determination for that project. The funding that we have that was provided in the budget is below what has been tendered. So those are ongoing challenges that we have regarding funding. So funding continues.
But just regarding the 1.5 billion reference in the plan, in terms of which would cover your strategic objectives till 2020, have you all requested that as yet from the government, or are you planning to do so?
As far as I'm aware, not in bulk, not at that level, but in that figure, included in that figure, would have been the dredging. So it's going in a piece as the projects are dealt with then. So there's part and parcel of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to something the chairman would have asked before. You indicated that per year you have about $500 million in expenditure. That is 2008, 2009, or is that presently? Presently?
Presently.
What was the expenditure at 2008, 2009?
We don't have those figures with us, but can be presented if requested.
Okay. And $285 million was the value of your revenue, correct? Okay, so what accounts for the $215 million in shortfall? What fund is that?
The shortfall is mainly for TTIT, Government Shipping Service. That's where most of the shortfall is. And basically.
How is it funded?
Subventions.
Government subventions?
Subventions, correct.
Okay. I also noticed that net financing costs $126 million. Could you explain that? This is in 2009. I'm looking at your.
Yeah, those are loans. There were loans up till 1990. And these should be government loans, I think. These government loans, we accrue interest. Is that what this is?
Let me add some. Good morning.
Good morning.
Jason Berkeley. The net financing cost you're seeing would be the active loans that port is servicing via government subventions.
Okay. So where we take the operating and administrative expenses and we add it to the net financing costs, we come up to about $490 million, but that was in 2009. So are you saying from 2009 till present in 2019, your expenditure is around 500 million? It continues to be around 500 million?
It may be more than, if it would have increased that, it may be more than 500 million, because the TTIT, which is the government shipping service, is not included in that figure.
So it may be more presently?
Yes.
Okay. And the $285 million revenue has not increased since 2009, because you indicated that the $285 million in revenue, that is at 2019, in 2019, correct? Well, not in 2019, in 2018.
It would be ballpark around the same figure.
So your revenues have not increased since 2009, because in 2009 your revenues were 279 million.
No, nothing significantly.
Nothing significant. Do you have any strategy to increase revenues at this time? Because from where I sit, it seems as though you've been in a constant debt spiral since 2009. Continual debt spiral.
Yes. Judy?
Right. There are plans in terms of revenue generation for the, and this is in line with the strategic plans, because for instance, the cargo handling facility and the cargo business, as was indicated earlier, at one point, 2009, the Port of Port of Spain would have handled 400,000 TEUs, which is 20-foot equivalent container units. Revenue generally over the years have been in excess of 250 million. So that's a sort of 250 million, 300 million for the cargo handling. However, since 2010 and continuing, volumes have been declining, but mainly in the area of transshipment. And that was in part mainly due to the expansion of the Panama Canal. The Port of Spain can, at this point in time, only handle Panamax vessels up to 5,000 TEUs, draft of, say, 11 meters max. The vessels that are now transiting the canal are in excess of 5,000 TEUs, up to 13,000 TEUs, 13-meter draft. So for the Port of Spain to be able to really attract the business that is required to increase our revenues, we have to have some investment in terms of upgrading the infrastructure. And in terms of the productivity that the chairman would have mentioned of successful ports, the Port of Port of Spain, with the equipment that we currently have, which half of which is beyond its economic life, but still in use, our productivity levels are 25 moves per hour, berth moves per hour, which are reasonably good. I mean, we have CMA CGM, who's our largest shipping line. They handle 40% of our business. But for us to increase the revenue in the cargo handling area, we have to have some investment there. We are also maintaining our customer base that we have, the volumes that we have, as well as we've had a 6% increase in 2018 over 17. So we've seen a bit of recovery. We've been able to get back some more transshipments to the ports, even though we can't handle the larger vessels. And
What about decreasing your operative and administrative expenses?
Yes. And we have also been working, because obviously revenues would have declined, so we need to match expenditure and cut expenditure. So over the past 3 years, we would have been able, so the port operates 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we also have a built-in overtime. Saturday and Sunday is automatic overtime. And we have taken steps, the management has taken steps where we work with the shipping lines to sort of make the operations flexible. And we've been able to cut overtime by 50% over the last 3 years. We also, so we would have a registered workforce that we have to engage. And what you would find is, okay, so the more vessels you have operating, because it's a gang-based operation. So you have, say, 3 to 6 gangs engaged for the day, 2 per shift on average. And even if you don't have a vessel there, you have to pay that registered gang. So what we would do is we would engage persons in other operations to be able to not have to call out additional labor to compensate. So we have been looking at cutting our costs, but there's a bigger picture to it in terms of the 24/7, changing our working practices, changing our agreement, which are things that we're also working on to really change the structure of how the costing is in terms of the labor engagement.
And you previously indicated that it would take 15 years to get to a point of sustainability.
Estimate, yes.
Right, break even. Okay. Can I just suggest that you call them teams instead of gangs in your modernization
No
thrust?
problem. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we're looking at the $285 million in revenue for $279 million in revenue for 2009. Now, in your audit management reports, consistently, the auditors would have indicated that there's been a failure to review receivables, that it's not being done. And I'm seeing in the audited financials that there's been provisions for bad debts, $5 million in 2008, $9 million in 2009. What have you done to improve the system of the review of receivables? That is 1. 2, what is the value of your accounts receivable now? And 3, over the past years, how much money annually would you have written off in bad debts?
Due to the specific nature of the questions, I would refer to the Executive Manager of Finance, Mr. James.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The audit management report consistently indicated over the years 2008 up until 2013 that there's been, well, the review of receivables was not done. So there's been a failure to review the receivables. And I'm noticing in your audited financials, the years 2008 and 2009, there's been a provision for bad debts of $5 million in 2008 and $9 million in 2009. So I'm asking, what has been done since then, 2013, to improve the system of the review of receivables, of the whole account receivables management? What has been done to improve it? I also want to know what is the value of bad debts written off annually from 2008 till now.
All right. As it relates to receivables, receivables are reviewed monthly. We actually provide by business unit the major receivables by customer, the 10 major. We review these monthly. They are discussed as to the reason. It's an aged report, so we basically know the age and how long the receivables have been on there. We discuss that, and we discuss ways of collecting them. As of September 2018, the total receivable is about 44 million. And that is PPOS being 21, Pacinco being 15, and TTIT 8 million. I don't know.
And how much do you write off? How much has been written off annually from 2008 till now?
I'll have to get back to you on that. It's not something that I came with that information with me. But we annually, when the auditors are in, we basically review the receivables, and they would ascertain if the reserve as we have it is adequate or not for bad debts. But it's done annually. It's not something we report even monthly. It's done annually.
No, I understand it's done annually, and the period under review is from 2008 to 2011.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll
So,
have to get back.
okay, can you tell us what are the specific failures in getting to the point of having to write off bad debts that the port would have experienced?
Okay. Currently, the port has a tariff. Most of its receivables come from its operation as it should be executing its tariff on a regular basis. For example, there's a charge, port charges, and all these things. These are what the receivables are made up of most of the time. In many cases, one of the biggest challenges is that we don't enforce the tariff as far as collecting our revenues on a timely basis. Our recent tariff, which runs to, I think, 2014, calls for a prepayment of port charges, 100% prepayment of port charges within 48 hours of vessels arriving at the port. That is not being adhered to at the moment. We are currently going through a process of informing most of our agents and shipping lines that we are going to revert to what is published as a tariff, and that they will have to pay within 48 hours of coming to the port. Vessels come, do what they do, and leave, and then we have to chase them down for money. That should not be the case. Ports in and around the world normally get paid in advance. That's one of our biggest challenges here.
So it's not just a weakness of the account, management of the accounts receivable, that function. It's also enforcement. And
Enforcement
perhaps
of,
the legal department.
enforcement of tariffs of our contract with shipping lines and agents.
Yeah, but that's a simple management problem that can't be excused,
can-
you know.
That,
I mean, there really is no excuse for that. Either you pay in advance
Or-
in order you get the good, because you know when the ship reach, the goods are going to be on the port.
that's correct.
So you make it very clear that people pay before the goods arrive. I mean, why is that a problem? I don't understand that. What is the big enforcement issue in that?
Well, it's,
Just manage the port.
that's correct.
Yeah, yeah?
Thanks, Chair. I'm listening to the debate. Well, not a debate. It sounds like a debate to me. But I have some concerns. And I must say I feel some of the pain coming out of management in terms of trying to maintain operation. Chairman, you would have indicated that in approximately 2 weeks, you're going to send a plan for approval. And this plan is supposed to bring the operations to some level of profitability within 10 to 15 years. Now, briefly going through some of the submissions that you would have given, I'm seeing where employees, the discipline of employees is a challenge. The skill sets of some of the human resources are a challenge. I'm seeing you spoke earlier about the equipment on the port itself, obsolete if not. So there's significant upgrades that need to be done. Space on the port is a challenge, being located in Port of Spain. I saw you did a study for the dredging. I just heard you said $60 million approximately for that project, and you don't have the funding for it. I'm also hearing the main vessels using now coming from Panama are much larger. What is it in that plan that you're submitting in 2 weeks that is significantly going to address those issues, and why 10 to 15 years?
The plan is platformed on a situation that where we are right now, we need the investment. We need the participation, or we need a serious injection of investment. If we look at the models of attracting that investment, and if we look at some of those that are currently applied and in operation in the region now, which incidentally, we are the only port in the region right now that really does not enjoy any private involvement in running the port. We're probably still the only public port in the region. And some of the models associated with that include shipping lines or investors adopting models of build, operate, transfer. Under those circumstances, if we assume, we're going in with some assumptions, we think we can attract investors who are willing and ready to be able to do that, based on some of the discussions that we've had. If that is the case, then we're still to be advising exactly how that relationship will work. But if we take the most fundamental and give to someone the opportunity to build a port, develop the port, invest, make all the investment, get all the infrastructure in, was based on that kind of approach that this estimate of 10 to 15 years is factored in. I will say no, we have not drilled into specific costs, That has not taken place just yet. So we are on a sort of tabletop, simple estimation of how this can work. So if we look at a project where someone comes and builds a port for us, and as the landlord, at that case, we then become a landlord. The provision of the space or the port for that particular operation will, the model of the agreement will determine that. But if we simply provide a concession to this operator, they build, they operate the port, and we as a landlord simply get a fee going forward, then hopefully we can take that to deal with some of the residual expenses that we have. The port itself then, based on the model of the agreement, will determine what that return is and over that period of time. So to answer the question, the key to realizing that kind of that estimation comes with the type of agreement that we get into with an investor coming in. I'm not sure if I would have answered the question sufficiently.
Chair, if I may repeat basically what I understand, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying then that a new port needs to be built and maybe the government being the owner and share within the earnings of the port, that is the model that you expect to realize this port to be a profitable port?
Not a new port per se, but an upgrade, a significant upgrade to what we have right now. Some time ago, a study was done. I think you may have mentioned it. A study was done about relocating or building a new port in Port of Spain and relocating east of where we are right now into the Sea Lots area and things like that. The study said or suggested that that approach was not viable at the moment. So what we have to do is to have an interim arrangement where we are right now and to upgrade this. So what is required now is an upgrade of our existing facilities. And that upgrade involves dredging, it involves getting some more quayside space, getting some more lay-down areas where we can increase the number of TEUs that we can put down to lay down going forward. So we have to increase infrastructure and also create some more space. One of those includes actually building a new quay, almost perpendicular now on the western end of the port. So those are part of the plan going forward.
Okay, so one last question. So is it then that within the current structure of the port, with the current operation, within the current authority that the board and the chairman and the CEO has, there's no way that we can become profitable?
There is, I'm an eternal optimist, so I will not say no, there's no way we could be, but it'll be with difficulty.
Okay.
With difficulty and time.
Thank you.
He's argued the case that it's difficult because of the reasons that he mentioned, the bureaucracy, the interference, and so on. But also the financing, the injection of finance, and the freedom and flexibility to maneuver. Senator C.
Could you tell me why it is you have at your management level, executive level, the CFO's position is not filled and your CEO's position is an acting position? Because I think, you need to have bodies in those positions, full-time people, to lead the organization.
This is this is a situation that the port has found itself in. I shouldn't say found itself in, but that exists at the moment. Reality A recent survey was done concerning the compensation for state companies. The Port Authority was second to last on that list of about 7 companies. We have had, and this is since I can only speak in terms of since my tenure on the board. During that time, we have had people who have turned their backs on offers because we just could not compensate people to do the jobs. So that is one reason why we are having challenges filling positions on the Port Authority.
And what steps you're taking to address it? Because I think that's part of what's hindering your progress.
It is a part of it, yes, and we have requests that have gone to the CPO for consideration for increasing.
My other question, Chairman, deals with, I'm not sure if it's you or another member. It's your financial statements. My pet peeve is that companies don't have up-to-date audited accounts. And you seem to be lagging in terms of having the accounts audited on a timely basis and up-to-date. We're in 2019, and you all are dealing with issues back in 2014, 2015. Could you tell us what steps you're taking to bring your accounts up to date?
Yes, I'll answer that one. We've basically just completed the 2014 audit. It's in draft as of today. As of the end of the week, we'll probably finalize that. 2015 audit is scheduled to start in April. We have also sent out for tender to select an audit firm for the 2016 to 18 audits. And those audits, as we have informed the tender parties, those audits has to be completed by June of 2020. So it's one of the priorities of the finance department to get the audited statements up to date. Yes, we have been behind the 8 ball as far as being unable to do the financials and have these audited statements issued on a timely basis, but it has become the focus of the finance group to get it done, and we will get them done by that time.
Thank you.
Quick question before Senator Henry takes over there. What is the role of your auditing firm in this? I mean, they've been with you for 26 years. And I mean, I cannot understand how you have such a backlog of unaudited statements.
When they joined, when they became our auditors, as is indicated in the notes that were given to you, they became our auditors in the 1990s. And their first audits were of the 80s.
Me back there now.
Right.
Just try and explain to me why you can't get it done with the auditor.
It's not all, the challenge is not only the auditors, the challenge is internal.
I know that, but don't the auditors have a role in this? I mean, you have internal audit. I think some of you are here. Okay, why can't you get the accounts up to date? I mean, you have a 500 million, you say more than 500 million company. It's getting subsidies from the state, which is really the taxpayer. Or where you're not doing so well, you basically had stayed at a standstill in terms of the amount of goods and services you provide, and in terms of any generation of new income. You would think that, you know, at least you could get your audit statements up to date.
The priority is to do so, because a lot of the other conversations you've heard in here with regard to public-private partnership, it has to happen before you do get up any partner. No partner will come in and want to invest in a port where the financials are not up to date.
Isn't that a bigger incentive to finish the thing?
Well, that's what we're doing.
Yes. Senator Henry, please.
Okay, morning, everyone. Some of you may know I have some knowledge of port operations. But just for the public to be aware of certain things, I'll ask some questions. In terms of the percentage of cargo that is handled at the port in Port of Spain now, as opposed to Point Lisas, the cargo coming into Trinidad and Tobago, what percentage of that do you handle now, and how has that changed over the years, let's say the last 10 years or so?
We handle 61% of the cargo coming into the country. Of that, 50% is domestic and 90% is transshipment. Over there's a table in here, but I'd say the market share has been reasonably consistent. We were 69%, so we've lost about 8% over the last, say, 5 to 10 years.
So you are still the predominant port of entry in the country?
We are, yes.
And what is the makeup of those goods? I mean, could you generally?
Right, so 40% of the total volume handled at the Port of Spain is transshipment and 60% is domestic.
No, but I was trying to get into what is the composition of the domestic goods? What are the main type of products?
Imports, or the main types of...
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because several years ago I had a student, one of my students did a master's project on this issue of port efficiency and so on, right? And we know one of the issues is that because of inefficiencies at ports in general, not necessarily Port of Spain, but one of the problems is that inefficiencies at port results in costs and prices being marked up to consumers. So I'm trying to get at have there been any improvements in the efficiency of the port over the last 10 years or so, in terms of how it might impact on consumers?
Okay. Right, so the cost of, and you are correct, the cost of the goods to your table depends on the chain that it goes through, the logistics chain that it goes through. The Port Authority is a terminal facility, so we house cargo. The vessels come, they discharge your imports, the imports stay on the terminal until the importer is ready to pick up that cargo. In order for the importer to do that, they have to go through a number of various processes in the supply chain, which is have customs approvals, have Food and Drug Bureau, all the different agency approvals. So the quicker that happens is the faster they're able to take delivery of their cargo. We also have a rent-free period that you're allowed to leave your cargo on the port, and after that, rent is being charged. If you take your cargo within the rent-free period, then you don't incur any costs in terms of leaving your cargo on our storage facility. We have seen an improvement. So, for instance, the dwell time 10 years ago of an import would have been 9 days. That would have gone to 7 days. Now it's down to like 4 days due to improvements, I'd have to say, in customs processes, because customs would have implemented ASICUDA, and so a lot of the interaction with the brokers is automated, and really the entire chain has improved somewhat. Just for information, we deliver about 200 imports a day out of the port. So our internal productivity as well, what our customers would be hauliers, and so they would gauge our efficiency by how long they're staying on the port. So when I would have joined the port 15 years ago, 5 hours was the average waiting time to get a container trucker to get in and get out. Today, a trucker gets in and out under an hour. So the port has improved, and even the vessels, the berth moves per hour, the performance of the port, 10 years ago it would have been 8 moves an hour. Today it's 25 berth moves per hour. So we've had over 30% improvement in productivity. truck turnaround time. So yes, the port has improved its efficiency and its role in the entire logistics chain. But other agencies that are involved in the delivery of cargo in and out, their input towards the efficiency for the entire country, for the consumer, in terms of the cost of goods.
Yes,
is
because I know they
also
complained a lot
valuable.
about demurrage and associate charges, and they say they have no choice. The businessmen I'm speaking of, when we interviewed the businessmen, and they have no choice but to pass these costs on to consumers. And, so it's critical. But on the flip side of that now, my question is, has there been any attempt to rationalize the labor component of the port operations? Because I know over the years this has been a sticking point. And what percentage of labor costs comprise your total cost?
I would have indicated earlier that we were able to cut overtime because we have institutionalized and non-institutionalized overtime. Saturday and Sunday is automatic overtime. A lot of the vessels, their times coming into Trinidad is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's when we have many vessels here. So in terms of the labor component, the port has about 1,500 employees on the books. However, but that's not registered. That's not, in terms of our registered workforce, is about 400 or so, right? 500. So in terms of the persons we are obligated to engage and pay a salary, so that's the percentage. In terms of the labor, the wage bill, the wage cost for the entire port, as it stands right now, is about 70 to 80% of our expenditure, right? So that is where it is. The engagement of teams, as I would have been advised, is directly related to the vessels and the volume of work you have alongside. So if you have a vessel alongside and you have to work 2 cranes on that vessel, then you need to engage 2 gangs. If you need to work 3 cranes on the vessel, you need to engage 3 gangs. The more, sorry, 3 teams. I'm accustomed, right? Teams, sorry. So basically, obviously, the more equipment, the more teams you engage, is the faster you finish your vessel. It allows you to get the vessel in and out faster.
Okay.
Increase the productivity levels.
On the other hand,
And lower your costs. Because
what about the management? How many senior managers are there at the port?
The exact figure, if memory serves off the top of my head, well, we have an establishment with positions, but many are not filled, right? I may have to get back to you with the exact figure in terms of how many are filled and how many exist on the establishment, but if memory serves correct, around 40 around there.
Okay, and last one, Chair, is you mentioned the loss of some transshipment business, and you said there were internal and external factors. I think between you and the chairman, I think they mentioned the external factors, Panama Canal and so on. What are some of the internal factors that caused us to lose some of our transshipment business?
Well, the internal factors would be the lack of investment in the upgrade of the facility to have the draft. Because what would have happened is the ships that would have been calling, the 5,000 TEU vessels, since the expansion of the canal, lines have merged and they are now using economies of scale, scope, etc., using the larger vessels to transport the cargo versus, using the smaller vessels. So we would have lost some of that transshipment that would have come on a smaller vessel to stay at Trinidad and then be distributed. So now that vessel is able to go to Jamaica, the larger vessel, with the same cargo that would have been coming to Trinidad. Some of it is going to Dominican Republic and other ports and the larger vessels, because they'd be coming from Europe, Asia.
Ayana?
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, I have two questions on that. My first question would be to the chairman. You have mentioned plans to do dredging work at the port of Scarborough.
The dredging at Scarborough, yes, was looked at. There are some challenges in dredging the port of Scarborough because it's a marine, it's a marine area there, and that limits the amount of dredging that can be done. Because for the information of the public, there's some areas of the port of Scarborough that have been deemed almost a burial ground, a cemetery, because of the past history and battles that were fought there. So there's some wreckage on the bottom that actually belongs to I think the Dutch. So we are very limited in the amount of dredging that can be done, bottom line. So that is the situation there. It was considered.
How the fact that we have those wrecks and other artifacts on the seabed around the port, how would that limit our ability to expand services and make the port of Scarborough more efficient and even lead us towards a state where it becomes a profitable entity?
Well, with that limitation, of course, that affects the size of the vessels that can go in. It will also affect the scheduling of vessels given our ferry activities in the port as well. So it will have to be something that is not impossible, but it will have to be properly planned out. Of course, the other option is relocating, having another location in Tobago for cargo activities. And certainly, to my mind, that can be something that we start thinking about now. That needs to be considered now.
Any consideration as yet? Have you all started scouting maybe somewhere or anything like that?
I am aware that that the Tobago House of Assembly is doing a study to relocate, have a port relocated, and there has been some study and preliminary discussions regarding the possibility of, in keeping with the same private partnership type arrangements, the possibility of developing a cruise ship home port somewhere on the east of Tobago as well. So there have been things that have been talked about, or there are things that have been talked about. We'll see what the future brings.
MP Mitchell.
My final question is to the PS. Final question, Mr. Chairman. The Port Authority is under the Ministry of Works and Transport, and as such, is a line of reporting, a line of accountability. What is the ministry doing to assist the port to meet their obligations in terms of submitting audited financial statements and ensuring that the port, there is effective and efficient use of public funds?
The Ministry of Works and Transport will monitor the operations of the port through a number of different mechanisms. We will utilize the board minutes. When the board minutes come, we will also receive on a quarterly basis the cash flow statement from the Port Authority as well. The Ministry of Works and Transport also work closely with the port in terms of its PSIP program, so that there is reporting on the PSIP, and we also source through the Ministry of Finance funding for those programs. We also utilize the mechanism of cabinet minutes and other procedural mechanism to ensure that the port get the funding that it requires, as well as monitor the operations to ensure that efficiency is taking place. And through the PSIP, we also utilize our internal auditors who will have to audit previous year expenditure that has to be paid in the next fiscal year.
Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to zero in a little on one of your more, it seems, profitable functions, profitable operations, which is your cruise ship terminal. So I am on page 36 to your 2009-2010 administrative report. This is the supplementary information to the financial statements as at September 30th, 2009. So your expenditure for that year, 2009, was approximately $1.5 million. And your revenue was handsomely $4.6 million. But let me just zero in a little on your expenditure. In your expenditure, you have salaries, $376,000, but you have overtime at $861,000, taking you to 1.5. What accounts for this overtime of $861,000? And is there any opportunity to reduce this, or has this been reduced? This is on the expenditure side. Your salary is $376,000, and your overtime, $861,000.
Which appendix is it that you're looking at?
This is page 40 of your 2009 to 2010 administrative report.
We can answer that.
Yeah.
We don't have the admin report in front of us here, but the question, could you please repeat the question, and the executive manager of finance could probably assist, so we'll assist if we can with the answer.
Okay, for cruise ship terminal, this operation has been profitable for you. The expenditure, as outlined in your audited financial statements, is approximately $1.5 million. But when you dive deeply into the expenditure, I'm asking, you have salaries, $376,000 approximately. But in overtime, you have $861,000 approximately. Can you tell us the reason for this large amount of overtime?
Yes, good morning. I'll attempt to answer the question. That would have been directly related to vessel calls. Our industrial agreement provides for overtime on a Saturday and a Sunday, and all hours after 5 p.m., Monday to Friday. So what we call that institutionalized overtime. So if you have a vessel call on a weekend, all persons are paid double time. And there's a mandatory configuration of persons that you have to bring out. You have to bring out, say, 16 security officers. That is included inside it there. You will have to have your cleaners around. Assuming in those days, I believe we would have had in-house cleaners, not a cleaning contract. And then you will have your cruise ship staff, which is on average 5 or 6 persons, but you will not bring out all 5 or 6 persons. You might have 3 persons. But really and truly, the bulk of that will be security activities on a weekend, when you have vessel calls on a weekend, or after 5 p.m., Monday to Friday. There's no other reason to have overtime except for vessel calls.
All right, and thank you. Your revenue has been, for that year, approximately $4.6 million. What have you done since then to improve these operations? Because it seems to be profitable for you.
Well, to improve. So the cruise vessel business, it has fluctuated up and down, but over the years, you know, there has been joint marketing efforts with the TDC and the Port Authority in terms of, and the private sector, in terms of attracting more vessels here and bringing more business here. So, and within that, so the passenger, the size of the vessels have also increased. So the number of passengers visiting our shores, we would have had one vessel with 6,000 almost passengers last year, a couple of those. So we would have also increased the head tax in terms of introduction head tax, increase head tax to increase revenue. So those would have been the actions taken, marketing, increasing head tax, et cetera, to increase revenue.
Okay. Do you reinvest in the cruise ship terminal? Because your roof seems to be in dire need of repair. Do you reinvest in that part of it, or does this money just goes into plugging other debts?
There is some reinvestment that takes place, and yes, we are aware of the roof. We would have been up on a vessel recently and seen it ourselves, and we know that there's work to be done on it. So yes, there's some. We would have recently done some investment in the passenger area in terms of refurbishment, maintenance. So the money goes back into maintaining the facility, keeping it safe for the passenger traffic, scanners and that sort of facility. So yes, we do reinvest.
Okay, thank you. Let me just jump quickly, just one question. On the matter of loans, I'm looking at your loan policy. And having regard to the significant gap between expenditure and revenues, do you think it's prudent to continue offering staff vacation loans and medical loans and other loans and paying their membership fees and all of that? I mean, I understand that it's a part of your industrial agreement, but do you agree that that should be revisited? Because, I mean, the port is not in the business of, in the credit or the financing business.
So, fair, reasonable question, but that certainly has to be balanced by the kind of relationship you have with your staff. The initial response would be, well, it is in fact a part of the agreement that you have with your staff. And it's a part of, it was considered as included in there because it's a cost of, a part of running your business and running your business. So it is something that can be considered. It ought not necessarily to be the very first course of action that you take because of the shortage. Reducing the quantities probably, but taking it out completely, I think there are other issues to be considered there in terms of your industrial agreement type circumstances.
But surely it should be revisited. I mean, across the public service, the motor vehicle loans are standard. But vacation loans, holiday loans, medical loans, and any other loans, just leaving it open like that, that ought not to be prudent where you find yourself in a $215 million shortfall.
I would agree that revisiting is necessary. I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you very much. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the cruise ship expenditure. I got some additional information from my peers. We had 2 vessels. We had heads of government meetings, Caribbean heads of government meetings in 2009. And we had a cruise ship. We had 2 cruise ships alongside for 2 weeks. And that would have also contributed to overtime. Yeah.
All right. I have 3 questions, and I will try to do them quickly and then move on to my colleagues, and then we'll close the meeting. The first question I want to ask is that generally, when you read the report, you see that you make a claim that your internal controls are pretty good. And yet, on the 12th of September, 2018, you had a situation where confidential board documents went missing. How do you explain the fact that you have good controls and this happened? And can you talk about this a little bit? What have you done since?
Mr. Chairman, the internal controls and always have to be reviewed and measures taken to ensure that you are trying to mitigate any possible risks that you have, that you can foresee. The internal controls that we have on the port at the moment are not where they need to be, are not where they should be, and it is a work in progress in terms of improving, managing the risks that we face, and actually putting together a proper risk management process to improve the existing conditions that exist at the moment. We cannot rule out, and in the process, that your risk management methods or mitigation measures are always trying to
catch up.
Always trying to catch up, yes, and the people and against people with a particular intent. So but that will.
Have you done anything since those documents were taken or went missing? Have you done anything since?
As a matter of fact, on Friday of this week, we'll be having a meeting with to look at the report coming out of an investigation that was done regarding that.
All right, so the matter is actively being pursued then. I noticed that in this major document, this big document here, you had a section on tender procedures, and then you had the issue of projects, another section with issue of projects from 2008 to 2018. In neither of those sections was the issue of procurement of vessels for the ferry run from Tobago to Trinidad included. Can you explain that?
Chairman, you're talking of the period 2008 to 2018.
To 18. So that would have taken a very active period.
The last procurement of vessels would have taken place in, what year was that, 2003, 2? Procurement of vessels. The last time vessels were purchased was prior to that time, so hence you wouldn't see the tender procedures for the procurement of the vessels.
So the port has not been involved in any procurement activity at all?
No, yes, the port has been involved in, yes, the other vessels, the cargo vessels. But you're saying that you would not have seen them in, which list are you referring to?
Well, there are two sections there. One is the tender procedures, which simply lists the procedures, so there's nothing about tendering. And then there's a second section which deals with projects from 2008 to 2018, but it has nothing there about procurement of vessels.
The projects we would have been referencing were the PSIP type projects.
Okay, so
That's why
those would be
those, yes, that's
PSIP.
why the vessels, the cargo vessels would not have been included.
But I
there.
just want to establish that the port, the Port Authority, were you or were you not involved, and what was the extent of your involvement in the procurement of any vessels
Good morning.
having to do with the Tobago to Trinidad run? Yes.
Yes. Okay, the port would have acted on behalf of the government to
Yes.
evaluate tenders recently in the 2017 year. Reference is made to the policies that we were guided by on page 47,
Yes.
not any specific question, section that you referred to.
Yes, so that is mentioned in 47. I mean,
Page 47.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so basically what we identify under that section is what policies were used to guide the port in conducting the evaluation, right? As far as to the extent to which we were involved, submissions were received and evaluated, and through the tender process,
Recommendations
were made.
Okay. Can I ask, were you satisfied that you were allowed to play the role that you would have been expected to play in that process in 2017?
Yes, I was.
So you were satisfied that you played the role?
Yeah.
You made your recommendations, and after that, it was out of your hands?
Correct.
So that is basically your position?
Yes.
Chair, you can confirm that that would be your position as well?
Procedurally, yes. I'm not being in position
At that time?
yes.
Okay, all right. And then the final question I want to ask before I go on to my colleagues is that what is the relationship between the ministry and the board of the Port Authority? I'm asking the PS this, because one of the things that the chair said that seems to be an issue is bureaucracy, interference, and the other one had to do, I think, is out of your jurisdiction, which has to do with equipment and infrastructure and so on. But what is your relationship with the board, and how has that been, let's say, over the last 2 years?
Mr. Chairman, the board of the Port Authority will report to the minister. The permanent secretary have an administrative relationship with the CEO of the Port Authority. With respect to PSIP projects, the Port Authority would submit its draft estimate in keeping with the call circular. The ministry will coordinate those submissions, which are then forwarded to the Ministry of Finance for consideration. We are then given an allocation in the given fiscal year. Based on the funding provided, the ministry will work closely with the Port Authority. In areas where there are insufficient funding, we may ask them to prioritize their projects and expenditure, and we may go back to Cabinet when they have gone through their tendering process and have gotten a concrete figure as to the expenditure going forward to seek additional funds. In such instances, we may have to seek funding within the Ministry of Works and Transport, as well as the Ministry of Finance, to identify funding to facilitate those projects.
Okay. When this one is to the Port Authority now, when recommendations were made for the on a boat to be chosen for the ferry service, did you make a specific recommendations of a boat to be chosen?
No, we would have presented the scores and gave them the ranking of the submissions.
So in your ranking, you would have indicated a preferred choice,
Yes,
right? On the basis of, like, one would be the one,
Highest
second
score.
would be the second likely, etc.
Correct.
So you would have given in your recommendation a choice, but the rankings would have determined how you felt about each option.
correct.
And it was then up to the authorities to accept or reject.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Sipers, you had some? Ms. Sipers?
I just have a couple questions on your internal audit controls, because I'm listening and you manage a substantial pot of funds that come from the state. And I'm wondering what is causing your insufficient staffing of your internal audit function, and what steps you're taking to deal with that. Because I would imagine the board would want reports on your controls and processes, and take whatever steps to deal with any deficiencies.
Okay, I will take that. The port embarked on a restructuring exercise in 2005. And we set up 3 limited liability companies, and plans were in train to operationalize these 3 limited liability companies. We had a fairly well-established audit department in 2005, but due to attrition, persons retired, and there was a certain element of uncertainty as to where we ended up after we have transitioned, and a hold was placed on recruitment. For the simple reason, as part of that transformation process, one of the conditionalities of transformation, as per the cabinet minute, was a separation of all employees of the port. So it was felt that it was counterproductive to be hiring employees on one hand with an imminent separation plan on the horizon. But that has been corrected, and we have had approval over the last year and something for a revised structure for the internal audit department. And we have gotten specific approval to recruit an internal auditor and an information systems auditor. We, in fact, have advertised and received and shortlisted persons and have come up with all the questionnaires and so on. And we envisage to have interviews on the 21st. We also have approval to augment the clerical level staff, to augment staff at the clerical level or at the lower levels. But the challenge is finance also has a similar challenge in getting persons with the appropriate training. So there's a toss-up between finance and audit with our present staffing to find suitable replacements. And that's where we are.
So you're saying you're interviewing people, so do you expect to have the complement up to mark, up to what you consider your mark in about a month or so?
At least at the senior management level, where the internal auditor and the information systems auditor is concerned. And the other element will be dealt with in-house a month for the first 2, and hopefully soon after for the others.
Thank you. I just have another question. In answering Senator Henry's question about the management structure, you said there were about 40 executive managers out of a complement of 400 permanent people. Is any thoughts being given to rationalizing your executive management ratio to staff? Because that seems quite high.
To respond to that question, member, I would say that one of the objectives of the board, one of the considerations going forward, is that we really have to do a total audit of the human resource of the port to be able to rationalize some of these apparent situations that exist at the moment. So that is a project that we are hoping to get involved in very, very soon after we complete our proposal to the Parliament, to the Cabinet, sorry.
One of the first things you might have to do is to change your work week. If Saturday and Sunday are your biggest days, you can't start on Monday.
Comment, maybe you would have to renegotiate what the terms and conditions of employment, because, 5 days could be any 5 days with 2 days off, not necessarily Saturday and Sunday. It's something maybe that you need to consider.
Yeah.
Senator Henry, you have anything you want to ask? You want to ask anything? Because you have a couple of questions.
Thanks, Chair. So this is, again, following the questions from the Minister of Tourism regarding the cruise arrivals. Now, I read Appendix 6 in the strategic plan, which speaks to the need to improve the berthing, the size of the port to accommodate the large cruise vessels as one. Do you have a timeline for that? And then I saw a figure of 35 million to improve the facilities on shore for when the tourists land. I'm not seeing in that any synergy with what one would expect the Ministry of Tourism would want to see. For example, if a tourist comes here, the experience, do they get a carnival experience when they land? How do you factor that into this? And the second thing, whilst at a glance it may appear that a profit is being made on the cruise business item, really and truly, because the overhead is over 100 million in terms of the cost, the expenditure of the port, I'm sure a significant part of that would have to be apportioned to the cruise segment. Therefore, we can't really say for certainty if in fact the cruise segment is profitable. Based on the unique financial structure of the port, could we get any sense that in the strategic plan that you are contemplating, because it's not finalized as yet, that you can look at really identifying financially, if they can't report separately, but identifying financially these business units, so you could really measure the performance of it. And in particular, if you can get more synergies with the Ministry of Tourism, and if you could explain what synergies there are regarding the cruise arrivals.
Simply to respond to thank you for that, to identifying that and indicate that as far as the cruise shipping is concerned, the revenue streams are fairly standard. Number of passengers coming in terms of the taxes, the tax, and of course the berthing fees. So really, to improve that, what we need is more ships coming in, larger ships coming in, that kind of stuff. But thanks very much for the indication.
Just ask one more question. You mentioned there was a report done that really looked at ports in Trinidad and Tobago. I think it was done in 2014. It had been used by the last administration, and I think that the current administration had also addressed it. One of these suggestions there was the movement of the port. That would be eastwards. And that was one option. The other option was to have another port somewhere and close this port in Lebre. And the third option was to move the port of Port-of-Spain, as they suggested, but to perhaps look at dry docking facilities in Lebre. And I think that had been looked at by two administrations, and it's now a project for La Brea. Is the port thinking at all, because you mentioned transshipment many times, and one of the elements of that report is that we could not be in the transshipment business unless we had a really expanded port that could take the big ships that you were talking about. And since then, I have read that the ships are even larger, and the sea routes coming from the Far East to this part of the world and using all the ship lanes that are available are much, much bigger. So it means that the port has to be kind of reconfigured. Wherever it happens to be, it must be reconfigured. Are those things on your horizon at all in terms of, I know that you said that you had put forward a proposal to be self-sufficient in 15 years, but that is based on your current location and is based on an operation model that builds on what you have now, a business model. Are you looking at those big alternatives? Because I think really we've reached a point in Trinidad and Tobago where some big decisions have to be made on some things. I think that the decision for the airport in Tobago, for instance, I think is a good decision, because what it does is that it really makes Tobago possible as an option. But you have a situation in where you must deal with the ports, you must deal with other things in the society, in the economy. What are you thinking about in terms of the port, apart from a business model which locates the same port in incremental progress over 15 years?
Chairman, I think, first of all, I agree that there needs to be a national picture looked at. And in the context of the plans for La Brea and everything else that is taking place, I think we need to take a holistic view of basically optimizing our marine resources as a whole, and try to come up with a plan that takes all of those into consideration, because we have some good things going for us.
But are you paying any attention to that?
As I sit here, I can say yes, but in terms of the effort in that area at the moment, not as much as we're putting into the interim, what we call the interim solution, coming out of that same study you spoke about. The upgrading of where we are is in fact an interim solution. So that is the focus at the moment. But on the periphery, yes, we're looking at the bigger picture. Because it's very possible that because of what's taking place on the externals, that some adjustment will have to be made to the interim as well.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Chairman, and all the members of your staff who have come here this morning. I want to thank you for answering the questions and for responding to members. And to my own colleagues, I say thank you very much for focusing on important issues related to the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. I would say that you leave us, and I think I can reasonably talk for my colleagues in saying these things, with three concerns. One, the notion that you're going to take 15 years to get the port to a point where it is not receiving subsidies from the state, I find that troublesome and bothersome. And I think all my colleagues would agree with that is a kind of problem. The second thing is that when you look at the structure of the expenditure bill and the extent to which a significant proportion of that is basically a wage bill, and you do not see any alternative revenue streams to increase the revenue side, I think that to me is a problematic issue, because there is not a developmental agenda that could change the proportion, even as you try to address the issue of what you have at the present time and rationalize it. And I think the third thing might well be, in the immediate short term, how do you make the port much more efficient and productive and responsive? Given a situation where, as you say, we have been in stasis for some time, staying at the same level. The amount of goods that comes in is about the same. I mean, we have to do something to generate some business for the ports to make it viable. And if we are thinking in development terms, we have to do that. So I would say that those are some of the things that bother us. And the final thing that bothers me particularly is the fact that the procurement process for the ferry system moved out of the hands of the port into another realm, which one might consider political. And I know that that is not within your domain, but that is an issue of concern, certainly from my point of view as Chair of Public Accounts, and procurement is an important thing in that process. So I want to thank you for your contribution. I want to thank my colleagues for being part of a engaging hour and a half or so, and thank the Secretariat for their support. And well, we look forward to hearing from you. We may have some questions that we may send as follow-up based on what we heard today, okay? And you can respond to that in writing. Thank you very much.